Welcome to the MCU, by the way. You're joining at a bit of a low point.
I don't think it's unfair to say that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been in something of a crisis in the last few years. I mean, I've made no shortage of videos talking about this very topic. And while individual projects have been excellent and among the series' best, some fans have questioned the franchise's overall state and future direction. In recent years, conversations around supposed superhero fatigue have only intensified, with the job of filmmakers and storytellers becoming harder to find new and unique ways to tell superhero stories in an interconnected universe. Especially in its television output, the MCU has struggled to find its identity in a post-Endgame world. Besides shows like Loki and Agatha All Along, most of the Disney Plus era series have felt like feature-length film ideas compressed or stretched into the 8-episode format, lacking the pacing and stylistic approach that defines great TV. Or when they're taking over established successes like Netflix's Daredevil, they kind of forget what made that show great to begin with. It loses the flair, the charm, the uniqueness, the undertones, the commentary, the intense focus on character when processed through the Disneyfication machine. 2025's Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four proved that Marvel still understands how to make great, compelling character pieces that harken back to their glory days. But this same success has yet to fully translate to TV. But while many of the other Disney Plus Marvel shows feel like movie scripts retrofitted for the small screen, it's clear that director Destin Daniel Cretton and writer Andrew Guest had a vision specifically engineered for TV here with Wonder Man, and it showed in the show's marketing and trailers. You can't watch any of those trailers and feel like this would be another generic cookie-cutter MCU show. It feels creator-driven, totally and stylistically distinct, dripping with creativity and passion, and also a much-needed meta-commentary on the current state of superheroes as a genre, and the recent stagnation that has plagued the MCU since Endgame. It has more in line with stuff like Barry and Atlanta than it does Falcon in the Winter Soldier.
He's not alive, but he's right.
The kind of adult dramedy that would slot in right after an episode of Game of Thrones on HBO. Like, that's the level we're talking about here. So it comes as no surprise that, yeah, I sat down to watch Wonder Man and I loved it. It's a genuinely excellent show with likable characters, a gripping plot, and so much heart and sincerity, as well as a smart deconstruction of the genre's recent failings. It was the kind of show that I sat down and watched all in one sitting, not because I had to, but because I genuinely wanted to, because each episode ended and I had to know what was going to happen next just because I was so attached to the two leads in this series. I wanted to keep hanging out with them and unpacking who they are and hoping that they were going to succeed in the ways that the characters deserve to. Truthfully, Wonder Man, like Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four before it, continues Marvel's self-reflective upward trajectory. It gives me hope for the future of this cinematic universe in a time where that's kind of in short supply. It feels like exactly what the MCU needs at this moment, and through the series' focus on a unique bond between two struggling actors and their personal journeys, it highlights what's been lost in the superhero genre and maps a path back to both quality and sincerity. And if you want to hone your craft like Simon and Trevor, all you need is today's sponsor, Brilliant. You've heard me talk about Brilliant on the channel before, and for good reason. They're my favorite platform for learning new skills that are tailored to the way you retain information. Brilliant helps you become a better thinker and problem solver through interactive lessons in math, science, programming, data analysis, you name it, building your understanding of concepts from the ground up. Crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Google, and more, Brilliant's lessons are designed to develop your critical thinking skills through problem solving, not rote memorization. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts such as electric and digital circuits and gear systems, physical structures, and more. So what are you waiting for? Give learning a try. Give that big brain a workout by going to brilliant.org/filmspeak, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description below. Brilliant's also giving our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant, which is pretty sweet, if I do say so. That's brilliant.org/filmspeak, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description, get that sweet 20% off an annual premium subscription, and thank you so much to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Let's be honest, not many of us knew who Wonder Man was when this show was first announced. Even I had to do a bit of digging. I was like, what the hell? Who's Wonder Man? All right, sure, let's go for it. Even though I think Destin Daniel Cretton is a great filmmaker, I mean, Short Term 12 is fantastic, and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is one of the best plus new actors to come onto the scene, the character of Simon Williams is hardly a household name. It's true that this formula of taking B and C level heroes like Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America and turning them into superstars is what built the MCU, but still, Wonder Man is even more obscure than his blockbuster predecessors. The character was created by Stan Lee, Don Heck, and Jack Kirby in 1964. His first appearance, The Avengers #9, depicted him as a villain, infiltrating the Avengers as a double agent for Baron Zemo before double-crossing the villain and joining the hero team. Since then, the character was killed off and his brain patterns were used to create the Vision and brought back in the late 70s, now a superhero turned actor and stuntman, and a founding member of the West Coast Avengers. Simon's status as a movie star became the character's defining feature. Even his earliest appearance showcased him basically method acting, and it's this unique quality that makes for a great exploration of both the state of the current MCU and modern Hollywood filmmaking in general. It feels like Wonder Man is the perfect hero for right now, and this new show does an excellent job of using Simon's history and journey as both a superpowered being and aspiring actor to comment on the genre's recent past and potential future. As the name may suggest, Wonder Man is a show about Simon Williams. Simon is an aspiring actor desperate for his big break in Hollywood. In the first episode, we watch him struggle to get minor roles on popular shows like American Horror Story, only to be cut and lose those opportunities because of his perfectionist, obsessive, and at times abrasive behavior. He takes everything a little too seriously because everything is like the role of a lifetime. He has to extract every bit of meaning out of it. He has to figure out the psychology of every decision being made. Simon is someone who's grown up on the words of screenwriters he's admired and has mined their text for subtext and applies that to his craft, to a detriment in an industry that only cares about making days. It's a typical struggling actor story aided by the meta commentary that comes with the MCU's quantity over quality issue. Also, the general treatment of film and television as content instead of art. But he's also hiding a deep secret. Having developed ionic superpowers as a child, he now seeks to conceal his abilities from a world and industry that would blacklist him. As more of Simon's backstory and personal struggles are revealed throughout the series, we realize that media is his primary personality trait, a fallback he's filled his head with to protect his id, which is why he treats every character, every role, every job as if it's the biggest thing in the world, because he's more interested in mining the psychology of the characters he plays than he is himself. There's a great moment in episode 6 that demonstrates this. When auditioning for the Wonder Man role at director Von Kovac's house, Simon is instructed to disregard the script and improv, channeling his real feelings and emotions into his performance. Instead, Simon performs a scene lifted straight out of Pretty Woman. It's a solid performance, sure, but it highlights how shut off the character is. He has a direct thing he can draw on from his breakup with his girlfriend to fuel his emotions, but instead of pulling from his own relationship he just lost, his gut reaction is to go to a film he's seen. His imagination extends only to the media he consumes, not to the life he lives. Partly because of his secret and the difficulties it's caused him in fitting in or ever really feeling comfortable anywhere, his love of exploring and playing with other people is actually his means of escaping his own inner demons. The irony, though, is that by not embracing who he really is and closing himself off so much, he stunts his ability as an actor. Sure, he's a decent performer with potential, but he's missing the authenticity and openness that would make him a star and give him the inner peace he craves. Alongside this, Simon Williams is also a character defined by his loneliness and isolation. When Trevor meets his mother for the first time, she recalls how Simon didn't have any friends when he was a kid, instead comforting himself with movies. She thought he was happy this way until, after an incident, he told her,
"Thank you for loving me, Mommy."
Even as an adult, that hasn't changed much for Simon. Film and the pursuit of a career in that world is Simon Williams' escape. It's also the last remaining connection he has to his father, the person who understood everything Simon was going through and the intense loneliness and ostracization he endured as a child. He took Simon to see Wonder Man as a kid, skipping school so he wouldn't have to be bullied because he understood he was going through a tough time, and he wanted to show Simon something that he loved as a kid, something that imbued him with strength and helped him feel accepted when he immigrated to the United States. Not only was Wonder Man something Simon's father was passing down to him, nor nor was that film just a tool to help Simon better understand himself, but following the screening, it was the moment where his father told him that he sees the potential for him to be truly great in the world of acting. He's seen him be a part of these plays, and while, yeah, they're school plays, he saw something deeper within him. He saw talent and nurtured that talent because that talent was a way of Simon feeling whole in his being. His father believed in him, and Simon never let go of that. And on top of everything else that acting provides him, that was the primary driving force behind him wanting to not only pursue Wonder Man, but pursue the career that he's in. It was a moment of the one person who seemed to understand Simon, recognizing the potential and humanity that existed within him. And so deep down, he wanted to continue honoring that. He wanted to continue honoring the love that his father had for him. He also suffers from the thing that plagues most creative people, an obsessive tunnel vision, a drive to realize his dream, which prevents him from living life, which I have to say was something that I find myself kind of suffering from at times, just an insane focus on the work, on the here and now, and getting to the next level, and really missing out on the things that might actually help you get to that point. I mean, Simon I actually found to be an incredibly relatable character, someone who acts selfishly, but perhaps doesn't recognize that they're acting selfishly because all he's trying to do is protect himself. There's this inability to be open and honest with the people around him because of this inner conflict. He doesn't necessarily share a lot. His primary language is film and television. And someone like me who's not necessarily the most open and forthcoming person, I just found that to be really cool to see in a character where he's not this perfect individual, where he has flaws, and those flaws stem from an inability to let people in, an inability to express himself. And so instead of addressing that issue that's kind of holding him back in a lot of ways in life, he puts all of his focus and attention into the work, which is great, but it only will get him so far. Like, he's not a bad actor, but at a certain point, that inability to address the thing that's inside you, that inability to be open and talk to people and interact with people on a human level, I mean, that's the thing, especially as an actor, that would get him to where he needs to go. As a creative, that's the thing that's going to help you be a better creative. And so just everything about this character, I was like, fuck, man, like, I didn't expect to, but I see myself in this guy. I get the struggle. And so Simon, like, instantly became one of my favorite new characters in the MCU. When the news of the Wonder Man remake breaks in episode 1, Simon is determined to land the role. Not only is the original Flash Gordon-style 1980s film steeped in his own childhood and trauma, being his escape from his problems and a memory he associated with his now-deceased father, but he also believes it's a role he's quite literally born to play. He believes that being cast will change his life. But what actually changes his life is the genuine human connection, his friendship with Trevor he makes during this process. This emotional complexity of Simon's character and his journey is only compounded when his powers begin to manifest throughout the show, which appear in times of great anger and emotion and threaten to deny his dream of ever being realized. This is also compounded by the looming threats of the Doorman Clause, more on that later, and the Department of Damage Control, which closes in on Simon with every audition. However, as great as Simon's character and journey are, he's only 50% of what makes this series work so well. Joining him for the ride is your friend and mine, Trevor Slattery. Last seen in 2021's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Trevor, much like Simon, is a character desperately trying to escape his past, in the shadow of his time as the fake Mandarin still looming over him. Now, 13 years sober and trying to rebuild his career, Trevor and Simon quickly become kindred spirits. These two unlikely stars share not only a bond through their love of acting and cinema, but also in feeling like outsiders and monsters to the world. Trevor's stint as the Mandarin, a career in culturally defining albatross hanging around his neck, and Simon, a closeted superhuman held back from being a truly great actor. Neither man judges the other, which is part of why they become great friends. Trevor is not only a mirror to Simon, reflecting his own personal turmoil, but also becomes something of a spiritual father figure, giving Simon the same encouragement, guidance, and self-belief that has been missing from his life since his father's untimely death. The scene where they first meet at a screening of Midnight Cowboy perfectly encapsulates this, and much like Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight's characters in that film, Simon and Trevor quickly form an unshakable bond, helping each other grow as both aspiring movie stars and people as they together, grapple with their anxieties, traumas, and past mistakes. For Simon, this is the secret of his abilities, with Hollywood's ban on superpowered beings under the doorman clause evoking memories of the Hays Code and the ensuing moral panic and blacklisting of alleged communists within the industry during the 1950s. Not only does this ban on superpowered people evoke this historical panic, but it also draws obvious parallels to the struggling of LGBTQ+ actors who had to hide their identity to succeed, and how people of color are given limited opportunities to be their authentic selves on screen. This feels especially permanent in today's political climate, with the show explicitly characterizing Simon and his family as Haitian, at a time when being Haitian, or really an immigrant in general, is met with further adversity, inhumanity, and exclusion. The doorman clause itself also reflects this situation. While earlier episodes mention this mysterious clause that bans superpowered actors from working in the industry, episode 4 showcases the rise and fall of Demar Davis and how fame in the Hollywood system exploits, fetishize, and ultimately disregard minorities. If you thought Wonder Man was an obscure comic book character, Doorman takes that to a whole new level. Created by John Byrne and first appearing in West Coast Avengers number 46 from July 1989, he's a mutant with the power to turn his own body into a door, who becomes a founding member of the comedic Great Lake Avengers. Here, though, the character is kind of turned on his head, given a shocking amount of nuance, gravitas, and emotion. We witness Demar rise from a nightclub bouncer with a secret superpower to an overnight sensation and pop culture icon, with his portal-based powers being embraced by the world. But just as quickly as he's built up, Doorman is discarded by the industry and left ruined when something outside of his control happens and, I guess, kills Josh Gad?
Call me Josh. Or Jay Gad. I'm trying to make that a thing.
Hollywood sees Demar's powers and rising fame and tries to capitalize on it for profit instead of trying to understand it. He becomes an actor, starring alongside Josh Gad in a film quite literally called Cash Grab, because that's all the industry sees him as. Not a person with real thoughts, feelings, and aspirations of their own, but dollar signs that can be disposed of when he stops being profitable. I mean, it was something Demar wasn't even necessarily interested in. He was perfectly happy and content living life the way he was as a bouncer at this club, meeting new people, learning their stories, interacting with new faces on a nightly basis. When the industry pushes superficiality onto him and entices him with all of these material things, his life begins to change and he starts living in a way that he wasn't used to living, and kind of finds himself in a lot of debt, having to do things that diminish his self-worth. And then, as is always the case, the industry blames him for not knowing any better, for not being better. What's so brilliant about the Doorman episode is that it really addresses Hollywood's nature of exploiting the talents of marginalized people for spectacle and then just tossing them out when they've gotten everything out of them. Like, think about Shaq or Snoop Dogg, prominent black celebrities reduced to a gimmick and dwindling in impact and popularity, only allowed to be comedic and silly, not taken seriously, pushed to the point of doing stuff that they don't actually care about, that doesn't bring them joy, just to pay off the debts and bills and lifestyle the industry has thrust upon them. For as much as Doorman is about the pitfalls of fame, it's more so how the industry views stories of marginalized people, a flavor of the month that isn't really given a chance to blossom. I mean, just look at all the Phase 4 and 5 projects that focused on people of color and marginalized experiences. Marvel never even tried to give them a chance to succeed. They just, jumped ship when people stopped caring. Their story, their talents, their ability is something that people covet. It's something the industry covets. And that's kind of what made me think of Jordan Peele's Nope. I mean, these are ideas that he focuses on intensely in that film. These characters were propped up to be the next big thing, only to fizzle out as they moved on to the next person on the call sheet. They're expendable and always have been in the eyes of the industry. This tragic tale reflects the harsh rise and fall of celebrity culture, especially in today's social media age, with aspiring hopefuls being chewed up and spit out by an exploitative system. But more importantly, it serves as a cautionary tale for Simon as he desperately tries to achieve his dreams without experiencing the same fate as Demar. Most people use Demar's gig as a stepping stone for the other pursuits in the industry, but Demar actually enjoys it because it connects him with people, allows him to enjoy a lifestyle that he wants, and affords him the opportunity to be himself. Simon is looking for that job where he can be himself. Everyone is really. Everyone is looking for something that they can be happy doing, but when you have an industry that is built on excess that asks you, are you really happy? And then throws a bunch of stuff in your face, it becomes increasingly more difficult to be happy. Trying to avoid the same pitfalls, Simon is forced to present a certain way to gain the career he's worked so hard for, but it's the same restraint and anxiety about his secret being discovered that hinder his performances and accentuate his personal struggles. On paper, the doorman character is silly, and could have easily been played for laughs. Instead, he's a tragic figure that tells us so much about the perception of metahumans in a 15 minutes of fame world and demonstrates the stakes on the line for both Simon and Trevor. But as much as the threats of industry-wide blacklisting scare Simon, the presence of damage control poses a much greater threat. Throughout the show, we discover that the agency is aware of Simon's powers and is monitoring him, waiting for the moment when they can capture, incarcerate, or weaponize him if they so choose. If Simon and Trevor's arc is all about idealism and the pursuit of passion, damage control, particularly Agent Cleary, symbolize the passionless, painstaking bureaucracy at odds with this creative pursuit. From his introduction, Cleary is also someone trapped within industries and systems designed to exploit and use people. In a way, he's not too dissimilar to Simon and Trevor, but while the latter risk it all to pursue their dreams and obsessions, Cleary embraces the emotionless, faceless bureaucracy. His pursuits of Simon throughout this series isn't born from a place of passion. He doesn't even really care much about him. He's just someone the agency can use as a boogeyman in order to justify an increase in funding. It's just box ticking as part of a department-wide mandate to hit quotas and increase the capacity of their supermax prison. Cleary is nothing more than a cog in a destructive and harmful machine, with his and Damage Control's mission to hunt Simon down for being different and incarcerate him, bringing to mind real-world debates about the prison industrial complex, police forces having to make a quota, incarcerating individuals simply to maintain their power and funding, or ICE infiltrating neighborhoods, arresting and shooting people simply because. I mean, fuck ICE, by the way. Cleary literally has a line about him getting an arrest. Didn't matter who they arrested, just needed to be someone.
Hey, body is a body. You said it.
Cleary works in an environment that actively rewards dehumanization, just as Simon and Trevor actively work in a way that tries to suck the humanity out of the talent until there's nothing left, until it's gobbled up everything that it can possibly out of these individuals and then discard them. For Simon and Trevor, they're trying to maintain that humanity as they continue their work and prevent the industry from doing that to them. And the only way Simon will be able to do so is if he embraces the thing he's been actively ignoring the whole season, just as Trevor acknowledges the faults that have led him to be this controversial figure. In addition, Damage Control and their sheer inability to reform and realize their solutions don't fix the supposed problems they were created to address can be read as a parallel for the comic book movie genre. It's corporate and soulless, doing the same thing again and again, like a tired formula just to hit a quota, all while diluting any and all personality in the pursuit of monetary gain. Damage Control's looming presence and threat to Simon's life is compounded by the fact that Trevor, still a wanted fugitive after escaping from prison after the events of Iron Man 3, was coerced by Damage Control into becoming a spy, helping the organization gather evidence of Simon's powers. Although the show could easily portray Trevor as a villain, it's a bit more nuanced than that. He remains a surprisingly sympathetic figure. Much like Simon, he's someone trapped within an exploitative system. His time as the Mandarin is explained as the product of Trevor's alcoholism and substance abuse, and he now finds himself unable to rebuild his life and escape the shadow of his villainous persona. Upon returning to LA and quickly being arrested, he's given the choice of serving the rest of his sentence or becoming a damage control informant, choosing the latter for the sake of his own freedom. But despite the ulterior motives from their first encounter, he and Simon spark a genuine, profound friendship, especially when Simon reveals that he most recognizes Trevor from his work before being the Mandarin. He sees the artistic soul within the actor, and that although he did a bad thing, a really bad thing, it was a convincing performance and shouldn't be held against him. I think the Trevor and Simon dynamic is a great way of examining acting in the way that actors always talk about not judging the character, always needing to give them their day in court. They inhabit the shoes of another, so it affords them more perspective as they navigate the world. They don't pass judgment even on the most heinous individuals, like the Mandarin, especially since Trevor was tricked into something nefarious. Killian took advantage of his artistic ambition and desire to be the leading man, exploiting him. While he should absolutely take responsibility, he's as much the victim as anyone in these situations. And you can see how it aligns with Simon being a metahuman shouldn't be held against him. It isn't his sole defining quality. Both the Mandarin and Simon's powers are parts of a whole that make up more complex individuals. Episode 3, which sees the friend's journey to Simon's childhood home to celebrate his mother's birthday, is a real highlight of the season. Not only does it explain much of Simon's traumatic past and why he acts and thinks the way he does in his tumultuous relationship with his brother, but Trevor also fully realizes how much he cares for his newfound friend and the similarities both men share. Simon's mother even declares Trevor to be the first true friend he's ever had, causing him to struggle with the guilt of his actions. This dynamic is furthered when both men receive callbacks to audition for the roles of Wonder Man and Barnaby at the home of eccentric, kind of Werner Herzog-coded director
Here comes Honey Boo Boo
Von Kovac. Through Trevor's coaching and constant encouragement, he and Simon are eventually cast in the film's key roles. However, these euphoric highs are immediately destroyed when, during production, Simon discovers the truth about his friend. In a heartbreaking scene, Trevor comes clean about his involvement with damage control and the real purpose behind their interactions, causing Simon to break down, lose control, and unleash a massive energy blast that seemingly alters the world to his powers. If Trevor's demons emerge as implosions, moments of self-destructive behavior highlighted by his time as the Mandarin and the drug dealer subplot that runs through the later episodes, Simon's manifest as explosions, physical bursts of ionic energy that quite literally destroy the things he's worked so hard to achieve. With his world crashing down around him and damage control en route to apprehend him, the final episode begins with our protagonist as a broken man, his dreams dashed, his only friend having betrayed him, and the one secret he swore to keep now out in the open. He's never felt more alone, more hopeless. How can he play a hero on screen when the heroes in his own life have left him? In an incredible twist though, and genuinely one of my favorite moments of this entire series, one of my favorite moments in the post-Endgame MCU, it's not Simon who sacrifices everything. In a callback to Iron Man 3, Trevor resumes his Mandarin persona and releases an eerie video claiming responsibility for the blast, taking the fall for Simon's actions and saving his best friend. For as much as Iron Man 3 split opinion back in 2013, the MCU's use of the Mandarin over the years has been strange, to say the least. Following the film's release, it seemed like the studio wanted to ignore the character's existence. The 2014 one-shot All Hail the Kings seemingly marking the end of both Trevor and the eponymous villain. Destin Daniel Cretton, though, has done a wonderful job of repurposing and recontextualizing this plot point. Throughout both Wonder Man and Shang-Chi, the filmmaker has added so much complexity and empathy to Trevor Slattery's story, turning him from a polarizing twist into a fully realized, fleshed-out character who feels genuinely sympathetic by this show's conclusion. Trevor's decision to reclaim the Mandarin persona and use it to save Simon and take the fall instead fulfills the character's arc throughout these projects. After spending years ashamed of his past, Trevor comes to embrace his mistakes. His character spent years trying to escape the Mandarin's shadow. Despite his successful acting career, it was the thing that everyone recognized and defined him by. To him, it was just a role taken out of desperation and necessity, something that he would rather ignore than embrace. But to the world, Trevor Slattery and the Mandarin are synonymous. The only person who saw Trevor for who he really is Simon. So, when it mattered most, how could he use the perception he's run away from for so long to give the next generation, his friend, a future? Earlier in the season, Trevor talks of a tradition in the theater of handing down your prop to the next generation. That doesn't happen by acting selfishly. That happens when you actually give a shit about the craft of acting. When you stop seeing your colleagues as adversaries and start seeing them as allies. When you start viewing them as one part of a massive theater troupe. When you start seeing the humanity and what they have to offer in their performances and what they bring to the industry and how they can push each other and how relationships actually push people to be better as actors, better at the craft. Trevor had his time. He made mistakes and he's been running from them ever since. He's been acting as if the whole Mandarin thing didn't really happen, but it did happen and we all remember it. And the worst thing he can do is try and go about the world as if that doesn't exist, as if he's moved beyond it. He hasn't, because he hasn't come to terms with what he actually did. And while yes, the circumstances surrounding it are tragic to say the least, he still bears some responsibility. So much of this show is about finding your moments when to be the main character and when to recognize your place. Sometimes you're better served as a supporting character in service of the main character. It changes from role to role, and navigating that is essential to success. I mean, really, it's true of life. Sometimes you are the main character, and sometimes it's important to embrace that. But other times you need to know when you need to support your friends, when you need to be there in service of something greater than yourself. That's kind of the journey for both Trevor and Simon throughout this show. It's Simon recognizing that instead of being a supporting day player with ideas of being the main character, the way to get to being a main character is by embracing who he is. And then that'll help him be a better supporting actor as well. By being more confident in himself, which will help him be a better main character, he'll start being less concerned with people finding out his secrets and stop acting selfishly, which in turn will make him more empathetic towards those around him and more concerned, more interested in how he can help them be better. For as much as Trevor talks about the need for actors to support one another, to be part of a group, he does act very selfishly. He doesn't consider how his reckless behavior affects those around him, and so he can give Simon all these pep talks and help him realize himself, but at the end of the day, if he's not going to lead by example, then it's all from nothing. It's just talk. He actually has to act in a way that supports the main character, Simon. As much as he tried to fight it, Trevor is the Mandarin. As much as Marvel tried to write around the twist, even going so far as to introduce the real Mandarin in Shang-Chi, Trevor is who the public sees as the Mandarin. So he can either let this define him or take ownership of it and use his past on his own terms. To save Simon's life, Trevor uses the Mandarin character for good, managing to fulfill his mother's dream for him and using his acting ability for good, not just redeeming himself in the process, but showing Simon the power in embracing who you are, despite the world's opinions. In this heroic act of self-sacrifice, Trevor finally becomes a hero, not a tool, a pawn for someone else. He took the role and made it his own, and no one can take that away from him. For me, this moment is precisely what I wanted. While people can argue that Phase 3 was a success, and from a commercial standpoint, that's obviously true, I'm not gonna refute that, there was also something that was gradually lost in that era of storytelling when it comes to the intimate, character-driven swings that defined the MCU's formative years. And it's only gotten worse in the post-Endgame MCU. As polarizing as the Mandarin reveal was back in 2013, it felt risky and bold in a way that subsequent creative decisions lacked. And here, 13 years later, Cretin and writer Andrew Guest managed to recapture that through Trevor and Simon's journeys, and with the same thing that started it, the Mandarin.
And you never saw me coming.
Trevor is arrested, and with the morally questionable Agent Cleary disregarding his previous manhunt for Simon, Simon vows to save his friend. After the Wonder Man movie releases to great success, giving Simon the freedom to choose his next projects, the actor goes method. He infiltrates Supermax prison and uses his ionic powers to break Trevor free and fly them to safety. These closing moments are the perfect way to end this story, with both men fully accepting who they are and what defines them, using their personal demons for good, and forming a bond that's up there with the greatest duo acts of the era. It's via Trevor's reclamation of the Mandarin that Simon realizes to accept and embrace himself. The real power isn't his ionic abilities or even his acting skills, it's the self-love, empathy, and openness he learns through his friendship with Trevor. As Simon flies himself and his friend to safety, finally using his abilities without shame or fear, he is Wonder Man. Not the fictional character or the movie role, but the superhero that stood side by side with Captain America, Iron Man, and the MCU's biggest stars on the printed page. By the end, Simon learns to navigate the world as a hero, taking the lessons Trevor taught about theatricality in the real world and merging them with his powers. The fact that he's now kind of untouchable as a high-profile celebrity means they can't necessarily lock him up. He uses his status to do good things and right wrongs. He opens the door for other people like him to realize their dreams, to be okay in who they are. Just as the original Wonder Man movie inspired Simon, Simon, as Wonder Man, can now use his power and his status to inspire those like him, and even those he doesn't understand. He gives back to the guy who needs medical help and has to work a shitty job at the prison to just pay the bills. Simon uses his wealth to pay those bills. He gets Trevor out, and he makes his dad proud by doing what Wonder Man did in the films he grew up on. Wonder Man isn't excellent just because of the performances of Yahya Abdul-Mateen II and Sir Ben Kingsley, or because of its hilarious parodies and critiques of celebrity culture in the film industry. Those are great, sure, but it's the series' sincerity and heart where it truly soars. For years, it's felt like the MCU has struggled to relate to the everyman, becoming obsessed with the stories of gods, aliens, and unattainable beings while forgetting the perspective of ordinary people. Hell, even its depiction of Spider-Man, literally the ultimate everyman hero, struggled to embrace the perspective of ordinary people. Here, though, through Simon and Trevor's journey, we get a sense of the real world beyond the epic fights and universe-ending conflicts in a way seldom seen in other MCU entries. Moments like Trevor conversing with Simon's mother, who opens up about his childhood fire accident and his father's death, Simon's complex and troublesome relationship with his brother Eric, and his struggles to connect and emotionally open up to his ex-girlfriend Vivian are exactly what projects like this need to showcase. Not everything needs to be this massive superhero blockbuster. Sometimes normal is needed, especially in this landscape. In a sense, the idea of normal has become method, so everything that this show is doing is kind of method acting. Because all superhero media nowadays has cataclysmic stakes, multiversal incursions, there's these deep existential ideas, philosophical ideas at play, and you know, sometimes you just need a relatable everyman with relatable problems. The maximalist approach to every cape shit project is why superhero fatigue exists. There has to be a human underneath it all who lives and loves and has friends. These characters cannot exist as their alter egos. They cannot exist as Wonder Man or Iron Man. They have to be Simon or Tony. It really speaks to the need for comic book projects to not exist solely as the character. There has to be something human within it, something that draws us to it, that feeds the heroics. Filmmakers like Sam Raimi understood the importance of the ordinary, making us relate to and genuinely feel for our heroes' plight, even beyond their superhero status and high-stakes battles. Cretton and Guest make me feel for Simon Williams, not the superhero or the movie star, but the son, the brother, the friend, and the person beneath the lights, cameras, and colorful sunglasses. I know I've been saying this word a lot, but this show is so sincere, and I have to admire that, because gone is much of the MCU's typical wink and nod humor in favor of actual pathos and earnestness that feels long overdue for these types of shows. Even the sight of a drunk Josh Gad DJing and singing, I don't know, I'm assuming Frozen doesn't take away from the compassion Cretton and co. feel for these characters and how much he makes us honestly care about them as people, not just heroes. This is something that the best superhero movies and TV shows understand. Filmmakers like Richard Donner, Sam Raimi, and Christopher Nolan understand that superheroes exist to both inspire us and highlight everyday struggles and fears that almost everyone can see themselves in and relate to. Both in film, TV, and the comics, these characters work best when they feel tangible and relatable, allowing us to see the human aspects beneath the capes and cowls, and through their struggles, give us a better understanding of who we are. What is that, if not the job of an actor? We may never be Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, or even Wonder Man, but we all have the capacity to be great as people. This has largely been lost in the genre's current output. Gone are the days of Sam Raimi's ultimate everyman, who makes Peter conversing with Aunt May as emotionally gripping as a high-stakes showdown with the Green Goblin. Instead, we become conditioned to gawk in awe at the return of legacy casting, or at the guy fighting this guy, or at the interconnectivity of a cinematic universe. That stuff is fun set dressing, sure, but it's only fluff. It doesn't actually matter. What draws us to superheroes and what has made these heroes so beloved for generations is the relatability at the core of their stories. It's the ability for the ordinary to become extraordinary by simply being themselves, by overcoming the odds. It's telling stories that showcase the human experience, tackling topics and ideas that reflect not only the everyman, but marginalized people and communities, and give their stories a chance, not turning them into spectacle. It's why representation matters. It's not something to be consumed, it's something for people to look to the screen and see themselves in their experience, and that means something. When director Von Kovac invites the actors to his home for the callback auditions, he delivers a powerful speech about stripping away the fantasy and spectacle of the Wonder Man character and treating it simply as a story about people. In a meta sense, this is precisely what Marvel decided to do with this project. When making his Dark Knight trilogy, Christopher Nolan approached Batman with the same level of respect a director would with a piece of classic literature. He didn't condescend the material or its audience, but instead took it seriously and presented it in a way that felt celebratory of its comic book origins. Some of Marvel's best films over the years have done this too, but recently it feels like they've fallen into the trap of forgetting the heart and humanity beneath the multiversal cameos and member berries. At a time when the genre is more saturated than ever, I think getting back to a place where we see these stories as accessible tools to inspire and help kids feel less alone, as stories about people, above all else, is how we overcome superhero fatigue and find the superhero genre's silver age. For me, Wonder Man is exactly what this new approach should be. My only complaint about Wonder Man is that it feels like a studio having its cake and eating it too. What's so interesting about superhero projects, and specifically the MCU, was that it was the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the roles of Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, that made stars. Now, where does the next generation of stars come from? In a meta context, what's interesting about the Wonder Man auditions is the fact that these movies used to be the vehicles that launched stars. Now, we're in a place where the only people allowed to be superheroes are the ones who played them 20 years ago. I mean, just look at the return of Steve Rogers and the X-Men. It's a star-launching vehicle that stopped launching stars. In its infancy, the MCU wasn't afraid to take risks, putting its faith in new talents while also helping to revive the careers of numerous actors whose careers had waned for various reasons. Just look at Robert Downey Jr. and new and emerging talent like Chris Hemsworth, or even Chris Evans to an extent, someone who, had dabbled in that space before, but wasn't necessarily this prominent household name that he is today. The fact that they moved away from this means they've lost something truly special, and I think this idea is beautifully reflected in both Simon and Trevor vying for their chance to be given a chance, whether it's with Simon and just kickstarting a career, or in Trevor as someone who made a lot of mistakes, went through a lot of controversies, but is now in the right state of mind in order to mount a comeback. Someone who has a lot of immense talent, but a lot of internal demons he had to fight in order to get to where he is. He had to hug the cactus, and unfortunately, the industry doesn't really seem interested in giving him that opportunity to move forward. He's only asked about playing the Mandarin and the toll that took on him and the experiences that gave him and whether or not he even really knew what he was doing. No one ever actually communes with him as a person. And that's why both Simon and Trevor wind up being great friends. They get that no one else sees them as people. The industry doesn't know how to use them, and so they'll just discard them. It's a series designed to critique and satirize the overly safe, stale, and formulaic nature of modern blockbuster films and champion the need for new faces on and off camera, but Marvel is guilty of these exact problems. They've become too reliant on nostalgia and cheap fan service in the lead up to Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. It's a worthy lesson, but one that Kevin Feige, Bob Iger, and the studio making this show haven't seemingly taken on board. But hey, maybe this is a wake-up call Marvel needs to remember what matters about these stories and why audiences fell in love with superheroes in the first place. Seemingly against all odds, Cretton and Guest made a modern adaptation of a relatively obscure and one-note Marvel hero that manages to be one of the MCU's most endearing and genuine projects, and one that reconnects the franchise with what it always should have been. Stories about people and the human experience. Ultimately, there's one quote from the show that I keep coming back to, and I think encapsulates what makes Wonder Man so special and the perfect antidote to modern superhero fatigue.
The real you isn't your condition. The real you is the sum of everything you've experienced. The loss, the joy, sadness, heartbreak, losing someone you love so much. Wanting something so badly you could burst. Hurting someone you care about. Being hurt by those you love. That's your life. That's who you are. Mirror up to nature. That's our job. When we share our pain, our grief, our joy, the audience less alone in theirs. We're all less alone.